Hello and welcome to The Hustle, and it's fantastic. We're here in our brand new studios here at Red Eye Media Productions here at Nexus UL, and I'm delighted that I'm joined with Paddy Finn from Electricity Exchange. Paddy, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me again.
It's fantastic to have you. The story of Electricity Exchange is pretty amazing. First of all, give us a little insight into what you guys do.
So I haven't quite come up with a succinct description of what it is. It's different every time. But ultimately, we're a virtual power station operating in the Irish electricity system. So whereas conventional power stations have a large power station and a control centre, all we have is a control centre that we run from our offices here in Limerick. We actually don't have any generation assets. So what we do is we use backup generators that are in companies all over the country, and we aggregate those to form a virtual power plant. And it's not just generators, even if a site can just turn down what they're doing. So if they've got refrigeration and we can ask them, could you just turn that off for an hour please, that's effectively providing generation to the grid. So we sell that to the power system in the same way as a normal power station works.
And without jinxing you or being offensive to what you do, is it kind of Enron-esque in terms of your buying and selling and selling it in a kind of stock exchange kind of way, or how does it work?
Not quite. It's actually it provides a service to the grid that normal power stations often can't provide. We can be incredibly quick, and that's the real benefit of what we do. So we get called upon at times in which, let's say for example, if EirGrid, if they predicted that there was going to be a few hundred megawatts of wind in the morning and that didn't show up, it wasn't there, then it might take them a few hours to get another power station started and get it up online and ramped, whereas they can call us and within minutes we're running. So that's it.
And where does the idea come from? Did you kind of notice that there was something missing in the market, or were you working on this before you decided to create a startup?
Well, my PhD was in this area. So my PhD was looking at how you can change consumer behaviour and actually have consumers become part of the electricity market in order to facilitate more wind in the electricity system. So if you have customers changing how they use their power, to use a little more at times when there's high wind, a little less at times when there's low wind, you can actually incorporate a lot more wind onto the system without having to, curtail it and shut it off. So I guess through my studies I kind of became very familiar with the area, and then there was an Irish company doing work with a company in the States, and the American company approached me and they spoke to me about the idea of setting up these units with them in the US. When I looked at the Irish potential for it, it was very good in terms of the rates that you get paid here and so forth, but for this company, Ireland was just too small. This is a company that onboards 1,500 customers a month in the States, whereas Ireland would be far too small for them, but it's not too small for me. So that, I guess, was largely the genesis of setting up Electricity Exchange then.
So it kind of moves along the road. Tell us a little bit how you kind of scale it and how it grew in those kind of short few years as well, in the lead up to what we'll be talking about in a couple of minutes, which is the deal with Bord na Móna.
Well, we started the company in 2013, so I started it with my business partner Duncan O'Toole, and it was one of these things we started kind of February 2013, thought we would be making money by next Christmas. And
this time next year we'll be millionaires.
Yeah, but not so much. It was quite a slow process because we're regulated the same way as a power station is regulated, which is to say heavily. So the licensing was very onerous, as well as that we weren't exactly very easy on ourselves, because one of our objectives was to try to stay 5 years ahead of regulation. So we had two main objectives: one to stay 5 years ahead of regulation, and the other one was in 5 years to be the company that one of the big players would want to buy out if they wanted to come into this area. So in terms of staying ahead of regulation at the time, in our industry, you needed to get power metering values back to EirGrid every 15 seconds. That was the mandated rate, and the kind of players who were the early players in the market had said, that wasn't possible. So we set out and we developed a system that delivered it every second instead of every 15 seconds. So we said, we'd be keeping good on that. So we were quite tough on ourselves in terms of our own targets. But while we were waiting with all the licensing and regulation process, anyway, we needed something to do. And at that time, we were onboarding some clients, and we were very lucky that we got in some really good multinationals, like that you'd everyone in Ireland would know. You drink their soft drinks, you buy a lot of their products, and we got good traction with those. It was difficult initially because you're going in with something that's very unproven, and you have to explain to them why they should be doing it, and they're wondering, are they risking something by taking part? So we really had to, be very good at what we do to actually get in the door there. And then once we did that, then we started to have, references. So we'd go to other sites and get in more and have our previous clients as references, and that worked well. And I guess we grew quite slowly initially. We got into the market, started trading in September 2014, so just two years ago, and it grew quite slowly. And then this year, at the beginning of 2016, it's almost started to snowball. We started getting a lot of onboarding customers. I remember we once joked that sometime, one day we'll be doing an installation a week. At the moment, we've got in the office, there's probably 30 control panels on a back order of, we just have to get them. We're working through getting them all installed. So that's been the growth to date.
Absolutely fantastic. And was there an area, you mentioned licenses and stuff like that earlier, was there an area of frustration about that, or was it just about being ahead of the curve or delivering more than was expected?
Well, with the licensing, it's a case, it is what it is, and you kind of have to pick your battles. So if you're going to the regulators and you're constantly hounding them that this isn't fair, that isn't fair, then when you need them to cut you a little slack on something, they're not going to cut you a little slack in it. So we kind of very much worked with them, and we appreciate why it has to be heavily regulated in terms of what it is we do. And we kind of actually continued in that trajectory. So I say now I'm on the various councils that reside over the rules, the power system and so forth. So nice. We kind of make sure that we're involved at that level so that we're very well informed as to what we're doing. So,
Does that allow you to be kind of, I suppose, on the ground floor as well with, you'd have big, massive corporations, but then there's you in kind of startup mode as well. Does it allow for that balance in terms of developing rules that suit everybody and not just a big end player?
Well, one major thing about it is it gives you quite a bit of credibility. So my background in this area is that's the area in which I have a PhD. So it was good you had some level of credibility in the area to start, and then the more you're involved in the rules and the regulation, and the more you understand it, and that you can convey that to your potential clients when you're setting out to them. This isn't just where it is now. This is what we're doing in our company that's looking at the regulations that are coming in 12 months, in 3 years, in 5 years. These are the systems we're building now that are going to future-proof us and future-proof you as our client. That's effectively, what this involvement really helps us with is that credibility.
Talk to us a little about the Bordemona deal. It was all over the papers, national headlines, etc. But you said, everybody saw the headlines but didn't realise that the work that went in beforehand. So this deal was about, what, a year in the making, you said?
Yeah, in about a year in the making. So it initially happened that we saw that Bordemona had a tender out looking for backup generators, and with what they were looking for, we kind of had a bit of an idea that they were probably looking at something in our area, doing something in our area. So we contacted them, thought, it might be a potential client, or just to fact find what's going on out there. And the response was, we're glad you called us, because if you hadn't, we'd have been calling you. So it turned out that they had actually been doing their homework on the industry in general, and who were the players, and
so did they kind of know you already? Were they already sniffing around?
So, and they had almost kind of gotten references. They knew that we were kind of, I think, we were a player with high integrity, and that we were very good in the technology space, and they were, they had planned to make contact with us. And when we were kind of talking about the directions of the companies, it kind of became apparent that there was a lot of synergies. Bordemona, I grew up with Bordemona.
We all did, Remember the ads?
Yeah, absolutely. And I spent many summers in the bogs as well. But we all grew up with Bordemona. We know them in that regard. That the kind of the wholesome Irish company. I think what a lot of people don't see is how innovative they are, and in particular if you look at the amount of wind generation that they're bringing onto the system. So they previously were their peak power stations, and that was their bread and butter. But with the market changing, Pordenone, they have a considerable amount of wind energy. They also, at the moment, right now, will be powering about 8,000 homes from landfills. So they literally use the gas from landfills, and that's powering 8,000 houses right now. That's actually under our control, and electricity exchange. So with their innovation and where they want to go with new systems like battery technologies and a lot of other systems like that to deliver more value to the consumer, to the Irish consumer, it kind of dovetails with our trajectory, which is we're developing systems that are aimed to make Ireland a smart grid exemplar.
And was that an important decision as well? Because the rumour is, the word on the grapevine was that it wasn't just Bord na Móna that was sniffing around you guys, there was perhaps a couple of other players in the market too. So was that, once you saw that kind of innovation and what they were doing, that it kind of made the choice for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there were a number of players that had engaged with us over the last few years in relation to, acquiring shares or majority share or otherwise an electricity exchange. Now, we were never going to let go more than 50% because we know where it's going. And some of those were fantastic companies to work with, and would have presented excellent opportunities. But with Bord na Móna, they have a real ability to just, try something on a very good gut instinct and make it work. And sometimes you just need that. You need to be able to just go out there and just try something that you think is going to be really good. And also they're a pleasure to work with in terms of the people that you're dealing with. We could have had somebody buying in that would make me want to leave my job in 12 months' time, and it would have been nice to have had to cashed in some chips initially, but then after that you just don't like your working environment. Like in electricity exchange, we're like a family, like in the company, and you're from the startup scene, you're very familiar with it, and that's the way you operate. Everybody knows every part of the business, and we're not massive corporates. So we want to have jobs that we love and stay loving, and to make sure that the guys who work for us stay loving their jobs. And when we met the guys at Bord na Móna, and just they're straight talking, honest, they don't try to in any way pull the wool over your eyes or anything of the sorts. They want everything to just work. That was a big important part of that.
And so why only 50%? Because you could have said, right, buy me out and I can take an extended holiday this time and go for months. So why just 50%, and why not maybe a deal where you kind of walk away from the company in 3 years' time with a nice deal?
Well, the company's doing quite well. Another way to look at that is why sell anything at all, and why not retain 100% ownership between me and Duncan and have 50-50 each? And the answer to that is that with Bord na Móna on board, which is such a strong partner like Bord na Móna on board, and everything that comes with that, what my task is now is to take my 25% that I now have and make that more valuable than my 50% ever could have been. And then perhaps is the time at which we look at a total acquisition. And
that leads it then into the future. So what's next then for electricity exchange? Where do you hope the next? I suppose you can never say what's next in 5 years, but certainly in the next 18 months to 2 years, where would you like to be?
It's very much a technology play where we're moving to right now. So at the moment we operate 2 virtual power stations in the electricity market. They're going incredibly well, and one of them is growing at a faster rate than we ever expected. But at the moment we're developing a system called IOTAS. So it's Internet of Things for Ancillary Services. The acronym is IOTAS. And as I was saying to you, we were somewhat of a paradigm shift when we moved into the market, and we were doing this 1 second metering. And the reason that that's important is that if you can monitor something every second, you can tell how fast it reacted, much better resolution. So if we respond, if I have 1 second metering, I can tell that I dropped off load, or I turned on a generator and it started in 2 seconds or 3 seconds. But we don't think that's fast enough. So we are developing IOTAS, and that monitors 32,000 times per second. So that is an enormous amount of data. And kind of to put it into perspective, typical energy monitoring systems monitor 2 parameters every 15 minutes. So IOTAS in 1 minute will capture as much data as they'd capture in 63 years. So as you can imagine, our Amazon Web Services account is exploding.
And is that kind of, because it's one thing to have all that information, but you need to disseminate it then as well. So what happens from that? Because we talk about a lot of companies talk about data and big data and all that kind of stuff, and using data to change a company and streamline it or whatever. But you have to disseminate that huge volume of information. So how do you do that?
So one of our original lessons, I guess, with our original system is we had a lot of data coming up to central servers. So while we're designing IOTAS is that as we grow our distributed infrastructure, we're seeing that as a distributed computing network, so that we can actually send tasks back down to the devices so that they can compute something and bring it back up, and we can aggregate it in the same way as Hadoop and so forth work. But also that they can actually maintain the very high resolution data, and 99.999% of that will never be needed, never be looked at. But then you just call on that device to send up that piece of information that is actually of relevance, and then you don't need the rest of it, and you don't need to store it all centrally. And the reason for this system is that there's new products coming in the electricity market that will reward very, very fast response. So now, if we get called by EirGrid, we have an hour to run. These new products will reward you if you can respond within 2 seconds. And 2 seconds is, you don't have time to make a decision as to what you're going to run and to communicate with them. So what this does is it actually measures faults on the grid. It can determine right here in this room if the general electricity system is having a problem, and it will take action right here, right now.
It might do, there's a lot of lamps on.
It would turn those off, yeah. That would be the first thing, it would be out of sound. And so we've done some trials in this, and it can detect a fault in the power system and shut off a load within 60 milliseconds. What that does is that means that if a power station fails on the grid, so there's an immediate shortage of power on the electricity system, we shut off loads really quickly. So let's say if you've got industries of big chillers with heating and ventilation systems, etc., we just need to take them off for about 90 seconds just to let the grid recover. But it's how fast you can get it off, and that's what IOTAS does, and that has applications in a huge amount of markets throughout the world. One of the best things for us about doing business in Ireland is that, as the phrase goes, Ireland is small enough that you can get things done, but it's big enough that it counts. And we get to work quite closely with EirGrid, and EirGrid are, again, another very innovative organisation in terms of where they're going with this, because they're facing problems with the wind that's coming off the power system, and they're facing them here in Ireland before anywhere else in the world. If Germany had 80% wind, it'll be fine. It's hugely connected to all its neighbouring countries. If some of the wind fails, they can just borrow it in from nearby. If they have too much of it, they can just spill it out into neighbouring countries. In Ireland, we're an island. We can't really do that. We don't have a whole lot of ability to do that. So we have to be pretty good at sustaining ourselves here.
Absolutely, yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the just quickly back at the Border Money deal as well. How did you, because obviously it's a big company that's coming to you and you want to work with them, but how do you protect yourself as well and the company at the same time, instead of, because some people might go, brilliant, fantastic, I don't have to worry about anything anymore, but you still have to make sure that you're still safe as a company. So how do you make sure that balance gets right?
And keep yourself from punching the air. And it was that was first and foremost in our minds, and we have in our minds a trajectory as to where we want the company to go, where we see the opportunities. So I guess a lot of the early discussions were around making sure that we're aligned in where we see the company going. Also then, in relation to some of the points in the contracts, and that they ensure that certain work streams in the company stay protected, such as our R&D, and that largely they are providing us with considerable support, and that in terms of them being intervening in what we do, that there's certain topics in which it's just left to us, and then it's only for big issues that we have to go back to the board in it. But happily our experience with them has been that any time that they have stepped in and we've talked about something, it's been in a completely positive direction, something that perhaps we hadn't quite thought about. And this is a beneficial experience for me. It's a very good.
And the importance of relationships as well within two different companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like in relation to that, why I find it very like a very good experience is because I've never worked in this corporate sphere, and Duncan, my business partner, never has. He's run a lot of companies, but he's never, worked in that space.
Managers for managers for managers.
Yeah, exactly. So they were very clear with us that we're a small company. We're very nimble. They want us to keep that, and but then they are bringing more kind of corporate governance our way. And that's in a very positive light. So it's always good to have new experiences. So for me, I'm learning now how to manage a company when I'm answerable to a board, as opposed to it just being a phone call to my business partner. And that's a good education, I must say. But it's been very positive in that regard. And I think they are very keen for us to keep that autonomy insofar as possible.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got two startups here in front of us. We've got Trail Whispers and Tallaght. These guys here, two very interesting, very innovative companies. If you were to offer them, I suppose, a few words of advice in terms of scaling your company and making investments and stuff like that, what would you say to them would be the I suppose the keystone of a good company? Well,
I think first of all the keystone of a good company is honesty and integrity. Integrity being honest when nobody's looking, and that's something that's really stood to us over time. I guess there was a period when we were in the market where we saw competitors who were they were interacting with prospective clients that we were looking at, and we kind of had questions in regards to what the prospective clients were being told and the level of honesty with it. And initially, actually, we would have lost some prospective clients on that basis. And you kind of go, well, God, if you can't beat them, do you have to join them here? But we just didn't. And that really stood to us, because then the following year, when contracts were to be renewed and the clients realised that everything that we had said how it was going to go was exactly how it went, they had been over-promised elsewhere, then that basically has now brought a lot of business our way. So now we're capturing a huge amount of that. So in terms of like maintaining honesty and integrity being hugely important, and people can read you like a book. Like you're constantly selling. So every time you meet somebody, they're buying you. They have to know that they can trust you. They also have to know that you're going to make them look good. So that's what everybody wants when they're doing business with you, is they want to see how do you make them look better at what they do, and that's kind of what you're selling them, and then you have to make sure you can stand over that. I guess another key point is don't be afraid of scale, and don't be afraid that something is potentially too big to tackle. And this is a lesson that I've had kind of repetitively over the years. So when I was in fourth year in electronic engineering in UL, I started a company which was we were buying in cars in Japan, importing cars in Japan, and it was me and a friend of mine. Not so much a company as an operation. And now my friend Shawnee, he was a brilliant guy with cars and all that, and we just said let's give it a go. And we always, when we went to look at it, it always seemed like something that you'd have to be a motor trader, you'd have to be in that realm to do this stuff. We said let's just try it with one, bring it in, and that worked. And we're like, okay, we can tackle this stuff. And then during my PhD, I was reading, let's say, through the rules of the electricity market, as you do, and realised that there's nothing stopping anybody from actually setting up an electricity supply company. So I ended up getting involved in starting an electricity supply company, Crystal Energy, with a chap called Joe Hodgins, actually a former UL graduate from many years ago, and went from this being a concept to actually supplying electricity to a number of large industries. And you kind of go, God, something that I would have thought would have been for the Airtricities, ESBs of this world, there's no reason why we can't tackle this. So then when it came to power generation, he said, well, we've done it before. There's no reason why it's somebody else's game. This is for a large multinational, because everybody has to start off somewhere. Even the large multinationals have to start off somewhere. And I think to keep that in mind and not be afraid of it, because there are ways for you to become that person. Somebody else did it, so there's no reason why you can't.
Absolutely. I was watching an interview there the other day, and they were talking about startups and what's the problems with startups now, and the guy was saying that part of the big problems now is startups don't go after the big problems, the big issues that are facing the world, rather than I can order a taxi now, I don't need another app for that. Do you know what I mean? And things like that. So start looking at the big problems, the bigger problems. What are people going to need, and how are they going to need it, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really interesting. If people want to find out more about Electricity Exchange and what you do and how you're doing it, and probably keep abreast of some of the things that you got going on regularly there.
So they can find us at electricityexchange.ie, or follow us on Twitter at elecexchange.
Absolutely fantastic. We're going to finish the recording part of it there, but if anybody wants to ask any questions, they can do afterwards as well. It was a really fantastic talk. Paddy Finn from Electricity Exchange, thank you very much for joining us at our first filming of The Hustle at our new studio, and thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you, Kehlan.